Hola, ¿cómo estás? Soy Jacinto Yorca y hoy tengo un vídeo muy especial para ti en el que vamos a explorar juntos una entrevista de casi 2 horas que hicieron a Peter Drucker hace muchos años ya, el año 97. Esto fue poquito antes de su muerte porque él falleció en el año 2005 y en esta entrevista que se distribuyó en VHS con una revista de gestión general y de management en España y que alguien ha digitalizado y que me ha facilitado. Bueno, esta entrevista yo nunca la he visto en internet, y eso que he visto muchas de Drucker, por tanto, pues tenemos un documento pues muy exclusivo y que nos va a aportar mucha luz sobre sus temas típicos de la eficacia del ejecutivo, sobre autoconocimiento, sobre el valor que tienen las personas. Quédate conmigo, vamos a ir comentando juntos los aprendizajes de este vídeo, dale un buen like para seguir yo y que esto me anima un montón a seguir subiendo vídeos y por supuesto suscríbete para no perderte las próximas entregas. Así que vamos a escuchar a Peter Drucker.
I am Peter Drucker and I'm speaking from Claremont, California. All the management books and management magazines are full of advice how to manage other people. And yet you cannot hope to get performance out of other people unless you make yourself fully effective. The emphasis on your effectiveness, and I will talk about the things we know that make an executive effective in whatever kind of organization. To start out with looking at the enterprise, which they are the executives, and see what needs to be done. And let me say the most common calls by chief executives, whether in the presidency of a country, or in an archdiocese, or in a business, or in a hospital. The first reason why they are not effective is that they do not ask that question and do not take it seriously. They know what they want to do, and so they start doing it. And if history is any guide, about 9 out of 10 effective rulers in history, kings, emperors, presidents, changed what they were trying to do because they asked the question, what needs to be done? And it always, or almost always, turns out it is not what I want to do. It's what the enterprise needs, and what would make a very real difference. And then they ask, what are the things in that list of key results, key performance, where I can make the greatest contribution myself? And they concentrate on them. Executives in any organization, large or small, governmental, business, non-profit, all of them, need to be seen as addressing themselves and working themselves on the key challenges. And so the next step in being an effective executive is to think through. It's always an enormous list of 40 people, 40 things. And nobody can do more than 1 or 2 at a time. And so an effective executive sets priorities and sticks to them. And so we can accomplish something. The ones who are often very popular, but leave nothing behind but shambles, are the ones who run off in all directions. And then effective people, and not just effective executives, know their strengths. You take that for granted with artists, but it is just as true with a business executive.
Wow, bueno, espero que estés tomando apuntes y que estés tomando notas, porque realmente es que cada segundo tiene un aprendizaje. Hay que pensar que Peter Drucker o Drucker, ¿por qué dice Drucker o Drucker? Bueno, pues hay que recordar, o vamos a mencionar que él nació en Austria, en Alemania, donde pues su apellido se diría, o su nombre sería Peter Drucker, dicho en alemán, pero bueno, después en Estados Unidos y cuando se nacionalizó en estadounidense, pues fue Peter Drucker, en cualquier caso escribió más de 50 libros, 50 títulos, exponiendo sus reflexiones sobre el management, el liderazgo, la gestión de empresas, la sociedad y el mundo, ¿no? Desde un punto de vista pues muy holístico. Y aquí pues nos dice Peter Drucker, nos dice la importancia que tiene ese autoconocimiento pues basado en qué es lo que tengo que hacer para la empresa, más allá de qué es lo que más me gusta hacer, y que uno pues tiene que identificar cuáles son sus puntos fuertes. Hay una enseñanza muy interesante en Drucker que dice que es mucho mejor centrarnos en los puntos fuertes de las personas que en sus debilidades. Cuando nos centramos en los puntos fuertes de las personas, tenemos una actitud de construcción, y en torno a esos puntos fuertes podemos elaborar planes, estrategias, y sobre todo podemos hacer que las personas crezcan a un mayor ritmo. Pero si nos centramos en las debilidades, pues seguramente vamos a conseguir que nuestro tipo de gestión sea más bien pobre. Centrarnos en las debilidades no sirve para crecer, precisamente. No hay que olvidarlas, y para eso se hacen estos análisis DAFO que hacemos continuamente, pero es importante tener en cuenta que centrarnos en las fortalezas nos permite avanzar a un mayor ritmo. Bueno, seguimos escuchando a Drucker y no olvides de suscribirte y dejar este like al vídeo. Seguimos.
Mozart was unemployable. The only thing he could do was to write divine music, and that he did and did and did. But he couldn't even manage his own finances, let alone anybody else. So what are your strengths? And I'm always appalled at how few people know that. In part because the schools are all remedial. There you are 8 years old and supposed to learn the multiplication table, and you're not very good at it. And your teacher will never mention to your parents that you're excellent at writing, excellent at analysis. All that third grade teacher will say is your child needs more work in arithmetic.
Vamos a hablar de fortalezas, precisamente, antes comentábamos.
There's a very easy way to find out, which is that every time you make a key decision, such as putting a person into an important job, or going into a new market, or spending money on research on the edges of knowledge, you write down what you expect the results will be. And then 9 months to a year later, you feed back from your expectations to your results. A very sobering exercise, by the way. I do it every summer now. I've done it for 30 years. And every summer I'm amazed, not at the things I do well, not at the things I do badly, but how little I really know about what I'm good at. And that's been true of all people who follow that method. It's a very old one. You want to know Spanish, 13th century. And within no time at all, you'll know what you're good at. And you know what additional skills and knowledge you need to acquire to get the full benefit from your strengths. And you know what to stop doing because it impairs your strength. And you also know what you are not good at. And most of us if you are any good, are good at one thing, competent to others, and no damn good on the rest of everything. And effective executives place themselves where what they're good at really makes a difference and work at it. You know, all of you people by now know whether you're right-handed and left-handed. 100 years ago, people didn't know that because lefties were suppressed. And now, when the 2-year-old uses the left hand to put the spoon into the mouth, grandmother didn't do what my grandmother did to me, give me a slap and say, put the spoon in your right hand. As a result, I'm never really gotten a strong right hand, but I don't have a developed left hand. And now we let lefties develop their strengths. But that isn't just true of by-handedness. Most of us are either readers or listeners. Very few do both equally well. And if you're a reader, you owe it to the people who work with you to tell them. Don't come in talking to me. Write out that 1 or 2 page memo, give me a chance to read it, and then I'm ready to talk.
Bueno, volvemos a hablar de puntos fuertes, puntos débiles, la importancia que tiene el conocerse a uno mismo e incluso ser consciente de en qué es uno bueno y cómo utilizar eso. También es interesante esto que he comentado a última hora, ¿no? Oye, pues no venga usted a contarme la novedad, sino redacte ese documento de 1 o 2 páginas con los puntos clave y déjeme que lo lea antes para estar preparado al final. Es una forma de eficiencia del tiempo y de los recursos. Estar preparado para lo que me vas a contar y ya tener una idea que me permita pues ser más productivo. Suscríbete y seguimos viendo este capítulo. Vamos.
So find out whether you're a reader or a listener.
Continúa
Very
con la
few
misma idea.
people are both. And if you're a listener, say to your associates, I am a listener. Present it to me first, then leave the memo. And if you're a reader, say, leave the memo here, come back tomorrow. And it will triple your effectiveness, guaranteed, because I've seen it often. But also, some of us do the best work in the morning, and we need to be undisturbed. And your predecessor was an evening person, the way I am. I've always done my best work after dinner, between dinner and midnight. But in the morning, I'm on the telephone, I talk to people. But for my own work in the morning, when I try to write something in the morning, I usually have to throw it away and plunder it. And I have learned to say that to the people who work with me, including my clients. And it perhaps accounts for the fact that at my age, I'm still the most popular management consultant in the USA. And there are a great many people, I'm not one of them, a great many people who, but in order to get the most of a conversation, a discussion, take copious notes. I don't write a word in a meeting. Afterwards, I sit down and write it down. In a meeting, I've learned the way I work is I listen carefully, but I don't interrupt with note-taking. And I have a very competent friend who's the exact opposite. Know how you get results, how you work, and make sure the people with whom you work know that. And when you say to that associate of yours who was trained by your predecessor to write memoranda, say, Joe, I want you to come in and speak first. You may have to say it a few times. and Joe will thank you for it. So don't hesitate to tell people this is how I work, and it's very easy to adapt oneself to somebody else's working methods. It is almost impossible to change one's working methods. As you grow older, they change. But not deliberately change them. Yes, one can learn to be punctual, even in Brazil. But beyond that, don't change your habits. Not that easy. And perhaps the final thing to say about your personal effectiveness is organize your self-development. I learned this many years ago from some of the most effective executives I worked with. And again, this is pretty old. Once a year, I sit down, push everything else aside for 2 weeks. I'll do it again this coming August. And I sit down and look at the last year. What did I really do well? Very often I call up and ask a client. In fact, this morning, before I came to sit for the camera, I called up an archbishop who is a client who inherited an American archdiocese that's in a terrible mess. His predecessor was a saintly man, and people loved him, but every roof in that archdiocese leaks, and nobody got trained. Here's a new man, very able, and we have been now working for a year together to turn it around. And I called him up and said, what did I do well working with you? And he said, you focused me on the development of my clergy, which I had completely neglected. And you did that very well by being very unpleasant about it, by the way, and so on. What did I do well? What did I waste my time on? Partly because I'm no good at it. Partly because it was not really important. It was just a practice. And very often because I did not follow through.
Qué interesante. Aquí ha habido dos mensajes. Antes nos decía, cuéntele a sus compañeros cómo trabaja usted. Y es más fácil adaptarte o que los demás se adapten a nosotros y nosotros adaptamos a los demás a su forma de trabajo que intentar cambiar su forma o su método de trabajo. Esto en posiciones de responsabilidad creo que es sumamente interesante. Y luego también nos ha regalado esto otro, ¿no? ¿Cómo le dice ese cliente? ¿Cómo te ha ayudado? ¿En qué he sido bueno? ¿En qué crees que he perdido el tiempo? Al final son herramientas, esas preguntas, no voy a hablar de preguntas poderosas, pero preguntas profundas que nos van a permitir encontrar esos puntos de mejora. Y creo que muchas veces no lo hacemos, nos encerramos en nosotros mismos, en nuestras responsabilidades y perdemos la oportunidad de descubrir más de nosotros gracias a esas preguntas, esa interacción con los demás. Wow. Seguimos viendo a Drucker. Suscríbete.
Business clients have concentrated on the outside, the market, the customer, the non-customer, and I am going now the next year to concentrate very heavily on the inside. A new labor force is emerging. They have to learn a lot. And this is what my clients need the most. I also need. And so I'll change the assignments, I think. And a year from now, I'll sit down and look at it again. And anybody who has ever done that, and I told you this goes back hundreds of years, has developed himself or herself. Yes, maybe I've come to the conclusion I once taught statistics almost 60 years ago, and I'm totally obsolete in statistics. They've changed so much. I am going for a 3-month reading course in modern statistics. I need it. Not because I am going to do statistical work, but because I have to understand statistics, and I no longer do it. And this is self-development. And so let me say, in conclusion, the first person, an effective or an executive who wants to be effective, has to make effective is the executive himself or herself. Many years ago, the one major European diplomatist who foresaw World War I and was afraid of it was the German ambassador to London. And when he became Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps gives an annual dinner to the King. And King Edward VII, as you may have heard, was a great womanizer. And so it was a habit. All diplomats were men, of course, in those days, to have a stacked dinner. And then the lights went out, the big cake was brought in, and out jumped the naked prostitute. And the German ambassador said, I will not do this. I will not see a procurer or a pimp in the mirror. He resigned. Now that's an extreme story, but a useful one. Look in the mirror and ask, do I want to be the person I see? Because that's what everybody else sees. Do I want to be seen as very clever but not very scrupulous? Do I want to be seen as a technician, or do I want to be seen as a businessman? A very important question.
¿Cómo quiero ser visto? Hablamos de desarrollo, de autodesarrollo personal y muchas veces, pues más que leer libros de autoayuda y de liderazgo, de management y de lo que queramos, pues tenemos que empezar a preguntar nosotros mismos cómo queremos ser vistos y seguramente está bien lo que cada uno piense, pero tiene que pensar si realmente pues está trabajando en esa línea o no. También me ha parecido muy interesante cuando habla de la formación, el renovarse, el recuperar esos conocimientos actualizados que a lo mejor no me hacen falta en mi día a día, pero yo debo saber. Esto me recuerda cuando un directivo de marketing, un director de marketing, no tiene que en su día a día sustituir la labor del técnico en SEO, del técnico en comunicación, del técnico o la persona especializada en todo lo que tiene que ver con temas digitales, redes sociales y demás, o con el que hace investigación de mercados, pero sin embargo sí que necesita un conocimiento lo suficientemente intenso como para saber qué está pasando, entender el vocabulario, el lenguaje y estar alineados con los objetivos que tienen los integrantes de su departamento. Entonces es obvio que la formación nunca está de más, y más cuando tenemos una posición de responsabilidad, como pues expone Drucker. Y ese cómo quiero ser visto, sin embargo, es muy potente. Vamos a ver un poquito más del vídeo.
With technology changing so fast, and far too many of my friends, chief executive officers, want to be seen as a technician, where they should be running a business. Do I want to be the person I see? If not, what do I have to change? And those are the keys to making yourself an effective executive. They all sound very simple, but they are not easy. And yet every single effective executive I work with, and I've now worked with executives for at least 60 years, beginning with very big businesses, and only in the last 30 years have I taken on small businesses and non-for-profit organizations. So I've seen a lot of executives. Not very many, bluntly, were effective. They were all bright people, hard-working people, very hard-working, lazy, executives don't last long in a competitive economy. And not very many got the right things done. And the reason was always the same. They asked, what do I want to do and not what needs to be done. They didn't set priorities and stuck to them. They didn't check back on their results.
Bueno, lo vamos a ir dejando en este capítulo, en este instante. Qué interesante esto, es decir, aquellos que no tienen éxito es porque hacen lo que quieren hacer en lugar de lo que se tiene que hacer, nos dice Drucker, y que además pues hay que tener esos criterios y esas prioridades muy claras para poder avanzar. Bueno, no dudes en suscribirte, voy a seguir subiendo las siguientes partes de esta interesante entrevista que se hizo en los finales de los 90, poquitos años antes del fallecimiento de Drucker. Oye, déjame un comentario si te está gustando, si quieres que suba entrevistas y documentos especiales de otros autores y especialistas clásicos, pero ojo, clásicos pero que son necesarios. Esto es una cosa que cuando tengo la oportunidad de dirigirme a gente especialmente joven, universitarios, alumnos de escuelas de negocio, en mis conferencias o en workshops, les digo que no sean autores que actualmente están en Twitter o en redes sociales no quiere decir que no sean buenos ni mucho menos. Al revés, esta es la base del conocimiento que ha movido a las instituciones con éxito durante tantas décadas. Esto es como decir que la filosofía de Platón, oye, como es una cosa muy antigua, no nos interesa, o la de Aristóteles, cuando ahí está el conocimiento y la filosofía y la reflexión de la civilización humana. Por tanto, con Drucker, con todo este grupo de pensadores históricos pasa algo así. Es la base y no tengo ninguna duda de que aquellos que comprenden, conocen y en cierta medida siempre tienen en mente estas bases del management y liderazgo, pues sin duda que después son los y las mejores directivos, directivas responsables y que en definitiva pues en su día a día, y ojo, y aunque no seas directivo, desde tu posición puedes ejercer también el liderazgo, estés en la posición que estés en la organización. No es el tema de hoy, pero no hace falta ser el jefe para ser un líder. Suscríbete, déjame un buen like y nos vemos en el siguiente capítulo hablando y siguiendo, escuchando a Peter Drucker. Nos vemos pronto. Hasta pronto, gracias.